From Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA, and the home of hot chicken, it's the Rick Altizer Show. Sit back, buckle up. Rick will talk with the movers, shakers, and creators who put Christ in Christian entertainment. He's a man who's clear so the world can hear. Here's Rick Altizer.
Hey, thanks for joining me today. I'm excited today because today I'm with the editor of the new movie I've been working on. My guest today is Scott Simmons. He's been on the show before. Scott, say hello to the audience.
Hello, audience. I have been on the show once before.
You have.
Was that your most popular download?
That was. More people watched that than they did when I interviewed the dog.
Oh.
Just kidding.
I'm not quite sure how to take that.
I have no idea where that came from.
Where's the off button?
I know.
What dog did you interview?
I didn't. It's a joke.
You should, though.
It was a terrible joke. What I've been doing here...
You interviewed like Taylor Swift or somebody. There's more downloads than that one.
Yes.
I think.
We have been editing a movie called Russ Taff, I Still Believe. We've been working on this for the last month. And we've been spending a lot of time...
Not completely. It was kind of on and off.
We've been spending a lot of time together. And he's still...
I'm so glad when you'll be gone.
Yes, he's still here at his
I'm very sarcastic, by the way.
Editing offices in Nashville. And we just today, we are celebrating because today we think we've just locked our movie, which means... What does that mean, Scott?
Well, you said the word locked, which is generally a taboo in the post-production world. But locking it means we have watched it, we have finished, and at this point, locked picture means there will be no more changes to picture, in that we won't add footage, we won't make it any longer, we won't make it any shorter, we won't do anything to really change the movie at this point beyond the final finishing elements. But the reason it's taboo, it's sort of once you say, oh, we locked picture, that's the running joke, is that jinxes you that it will not be locked. And there will be someone that will have to make changes.
So it'll be unlocked soon enough.
We got somewhere we're happy with. I don't know what the term to use.
Happy. We're happy.
We're happy?
And it's going to be going next. Our next step is color correction. So I thought today...
And audio mix.
And audio mix, yep. And I just thought today... we would kind of unpack a little bit about some of the process we went through and getting this movie ready. For people who want to see the movie, it's going to be in theaters for one night only, October 30th, 2018. And it'll be at a theater near you. And you can go to russtaffmovie.com to find a theater near you and get more info. russtaffmovie.com, October 30th. And so I am just so jazzed and excited about it. It's a great movie. It's a movie.
Yeah.
Russ was on my radio show a couple years ago. And my show this is what he told me, was the first time he openly talked about his alcoholism, was on my show.
Interesting.
And you can go to my website, rickaltizer.com, or check out my podcast on any of your podcast locations, The Rick Altizer Show. And you can find that interview. But he started talking about his addiction. And from that interview, he said he felt comfortable with me and just kind of wanted to know if I'd be interested in doing a movie on him. He saw what I did with Shonda. And the last Shonda movie, Enough.
Shonda Pierce, right?
Shonda Pierce.
Yes.
The last Shonda Pierce movie I did happened to be edited by Scott Simmons as well, and we did talk about that.
The same me?
The same you, and we talked about that in our last...
There is another Scott Simmons editor out there in the world in Los Angeles, by the way.
Okay, well, this is the Nashville Scott Simmons.
You would think there'd be only one, but you'd be wrong.
No, and you can check that interview out. But we did the Shonda movie together. This is our second movie we've done together.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, Scott, talk about kind of the process of... You get a call from a guy like me. Hey, I've got this fun movie. I want to edit it. Talk down some of the things that we did to get ready for this movie and some of the challenges we had.
Well, first thing I did was I hung the phone up and didn't answer when you called back repeatedly and texted and emailed. And I think you came by one day. And then my car was here, so I couldn't not. And the door was open. So at that point. No, it was fun. It was a good process. Well, I think the process begins, obviously, with you, the writer-director, and I don't think one should, a documentary director especially, shouldn't shortchange themselves and say, I'm the director of this movie. Personally, I think you should always say you are the writer-director of the movie, because in documentaries, the writing of it is as important as the directing, because the directing is more. It's a big thing to get the people to talk in the interview. You have to interview them right. You have to get them to say not what you want them to say, but to tell the story in the way that they want to tell it. At which point, then you, the writer-director, has to take, I don't know how many hours of interviews, possibly tens to hundreds of hours of interviews, and go through those to then build the story. Because this movie is just under 2 hours long. And I did not check to see how many hours of interviews we had. I should go back and look at that. But we had at least, I don't know, 8 to 10 to 12, would you say? Or do you even have an estimate?
No, just the last Tori and Russ interview was over 2 hours, just that one interview.
So
I'd say easy 20 hours maybe.
So that had to be transcribed, and then you as the writer, director, had to literally read it and just start picking out what's going to tell the story. And I may have mentioned this when we talked about Shonda, but it's kind of like a big funnel that you have the interviews in their transcribed state as this huge top of the funnel, and you just start weeding that down until you're into the actual spout of the funnel, which is kind of the script that you gave me to start to build the edit from. So it is not a small task, and it's a task that takes a lot of time and a lot of brain power, for that matter as well. That's why I think you always say you're a writer-director, because in documentaries, that writing side, it's not sitting down at a typewriter typing it out like a fictional narrative movie. You go see it in the theater, but you are arranging the interviews, you're arranging the thoughts in a certain way, which is also writing the piece. That's a long-winded way to say that yes, you went through all that and gave me a script that was sort of the base of the movie. That's just a bunch of talking heads, but they tell the story. At which point, I kind of put all that stuff in the timeline, and we sort of sit back. We do sit back and watch that. We often call that a radio edit, meaning that you are better off listening to it than watching it, because it's just a bunch of talking heads jumping around. And you listen to it, and you make sure that story kind of makes sense. And you rearrange things, you add stuff, you take stuff away, and try to get that radio edit into something that makes sense, that sort of tells the story in a coherent way. And then the fun begins, because then you get to go back and say, all right, you can't just watch somebody talking for 2 hours, even though in essence that's kind of what you're doing often in documentaries. But we have to find fun moments. Is there music things we can put some? Russ is a musician. He's a famous. He's a rock star. So we got music we can put in there. There are fun different interviews that have their own level of fun. That there may have been stuff going on and around an interview. In this particular movie, there was the Russ Taff Day, which was a fun concert at his house, and we just build fun stuff out of there. So it's not just 2 hours of just I always say air quotes boring talking heads.
Yeah, the documentary is an hour and a half. And then we've got an after show that has Stephen Curtis Chapman and Amy Grant came in. And so we're doing that kind of Fathom. We're doing this as a Fathom event, one night theatrical. And they want something after the movie that makes it special. So
the movie itself is about an hour 37, I think, give or take a few minutes. So it's a 90-minute feature length piece. But there's more in there than just the talking heads. There's comedy, there's laughs, there's lots of people, in many different ways. So it's an entertaining viewing, but it also has a very deep story. Which that's kind of the job of the editor, is once you give me that basic story on paper, it's to go back and look at all the other stuff that we have and say, all right, how do we start to tell this in a way that you can watch it for 90 minutes and not just be a bunch of talking heads. And that often involves, we have lots of archival photos that puts us in the time and the era. Sometimes footage and or photos that are the exact event they're talking about, which is great for historical docs or biographical doc, because we love to be in the place. We have a lot of that kind of stuff. Then you went back on a shoot day and gathered up what we call B-roll, which is just footage to give us something to look at instead of a talking head. But often that B-roll has a feeling, it has an emotion to what is shot that sort of helps put you in the story and helps you feel something through the story, which is all about, this is all filmmaking where
yeah. So I'm talking with Scott Simmons, the editor of the new movie, I Still Believe, story of Russ Taff. Going to be in theaters October 30th. I am the writer-director of that movie.
Yay!
I didn't know I could call myself writer-director.
Oh, absolutely.
I got another name I could say about. I'm a writer now, writer-director.
Well, and the editors of documentaries are often credited writers as well, because it's the editor that helps shape that story, and since it is not technically a typed something on paper, that writing, that telling the story is the writing. And I think you take way more writer credit here than I ever would or could. But there are editors who spend years on documentaries that end up as a credited writer because that's the input they bring to bring to the overall story.
Unfortunately, we didn't have to spend a year. No,
we did not.
But 4 weeks is pretty good. So part of the process was I would do interviews. I started out doing interviews. And we've got Russ Taff in this and his wife Tori. We also have Amy Grant. We have
Michael Tate.
Michael W. Smith, Bart Millard from Mercy Me.
Mark Lowry,
Bill Gaither. So we have just an all-star cast. Shonda Pierce, just an all-star cast in the movie. And they're talking about Russ. Russ is talking about his alcohol addiction. He's talking about how as he was at the top of his Christian recording career, he was struggling with alcoholism. He talked about his trauma as a child, very abusive home. So I have all of these, then of course, Tori's story of how they stayed married, how she didn't know if she could stay married to him, and the treatment he went in, and the time he showed up for the taping and he was inebriated while they were filming. And so we have all of these elements in the movie, have all these interviews, and people are talking about it. So then I get everything transcribed.
Well, yes, but I think it's important to pause right there and note that the movie itself is not it's not a big super duper downer. Like when you hear that description of what all went in, it makes it sound like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go watch this. This is terribly sad. But that's not the case. That's part of the challenge, to tell the story in a way that's not just all what I kept saying, Debbie Downer. Like the old Saturday Night Live skit. It's not all a down movie. It's very uplifting. There's some heavy subjects in it, but it's a very uplifting piece. And you as the filmmaker, I as the editor, part of our job is to tell the story in a proper way, that it's not just all a downer. That it tells his story of the lows of his life, but also the highs and the redemption that he ends up. I don't want to give anything away, but the happiness that ends up out of him in his life,
and that was part of our challenge too. Was to keep the focus on Christ, on what Christ did in Russ's life, and that the movie. I think what makes the movie so powerful is that the focus is on Christ. And I told Russ when they said Russ and Tori took me to lunch in Bell Buckle. And we talked about, they said, what would it look like to make this movie? And what I said to them was, I'll put your name in the movie and I'll put you in the movie, but the movie won't be about you. This movie is about the redemptive, powerful work of Jesus Christ. And he is he's the star of this movie. And so crafting that story, and because, you could make a movie about what a great singer Russ Taff is. Russ Taff, what an amazing singer. Wow, boy, he sure could sing.
Which some of that's in there.
But you could make, and I've seen documentaries where that's basically what the documentary is. Right. What a great band, what a great singer, what a great whatever they were. And you just get a bunch of people talking about how great that guy was.
And those are great. I love those type of rock docs, if you will. But they are for a fan. This movie is absolutely for a Russ Taff fan. It's really for a Russ Taff fan, but I think it's a movie for anybody who, first, if you like music, or if you have your own issues and your own problems you're trying to overcome. I mean, you're able to see someone struggle, and you're able to see that redemption in the movie. And you could interchange, Russ's story with a lot of other stories that hopefully could end up, in the same positive.
So I was giving you feedback on. I want to make it a love story. I don't want this to be. We're going to talk about Russ and his music career, and 3 times Lifetime Achievement Award for the GMA and 6 Grammys and 18 Dove Awards and all that. Right. Russ Taff, awesome, great singer, what a talent, but I didn't want to, that wasn't what this was about. This was a love story between Russ and Tori and how they found healing in their marriage through Christ.
Yep.
So then, so we get all these elements. I get everything transcribed. I go through all of my huge stack of my 3-inch binder full of
a lot of paper
of transcriptions. I highlight what I like. I put that in another document and I highlight that again. Then I take all those things and put them on 4x6 index cards, move them around, and create what I call the paper edit.
Right.
And then I gave you that paper edit, and then let's talk about where you went from there.
Yes, the paper edit is just like that sound. It is all the transcript written down on paper that then I put into the editing software in order. So we have the talking heads as your paper edit is set up, and that's where we got what I was mentioning, the radio edit, which is something you can just sit back and listen to get the story. So once we kind of got that like we like it, then it's a matter of going back and looking at all the footage that you had, all the photographs that we have, all the archival footage of shows he's been on or performances that he's done, and we start figuring out where that material goes in context of the movie in a very rough way. It's a very building block sort of Lego-like thing where you start to put the big, you got the base is that big flat piece. My kids love Legos, if you haven't guessed. You got that big flat base that you build everything on top of. That's kind of the radio edit, and you sort of put some of those big blocks on top of there as you start chunking it together. And then you start putting those little intricate pieces, the little little round ones, and those specially shaped things that really make whatever the Lego toy is come together into its unique, finished form, which is exactly what we did. I mean, we have, there I don't know how many photos, hundreds of photos to utilize, and where in the world did those photos go? Why would we put a picture of Russ, this picture of Russ standing next to a rock here versus that picture of Russ sitting on a chair looking at the sky there? I mean, there's reasoning behind, 75 to 85% of the images in the movie are kind of there for a reason. Every now and then you just need something and you go to something pretty, something kind of random, but for the most part, everything has a reason. Now, not every viewer is going to understand exactly why we put that photo there, for instance, but, our job and our hope is that most everybody will.
And those images, we're wanting to tell a story. It's all about, and you're listening to the Rick Altizer Show, and my guest today is editor Scott Simmons. We're talking about the new movie that we're working on together called Russ Taff, I Still Believe. It's going to be in theaters October 30th, and you can find out more information and ticket information at russtaffmovie.com.
Do you get a discount if you wear a costume?
No, you don't.
Okay.
A little cow costume.
Yeah,
so
a Russ Taff costume.
Yeah, talk to me about storytelling and editing and how they're related.
Let me think about that for a minute. In storytelling, whether you're talking or whether you're writing a novel or whatever, you are stringing together words and sentences and whatever mechanism you're using to tell a story in order to elicit emotion in the viewer. That's what stories ultimately we want them to do, is to elicit some kind of emotion in the viewer, the reader, the watcher, whatever it is. Editing is very much that, because you are arranging items in an order in which to tell a story. I mean, there are, an example would be on this movie, we thought we were done. I hope I can tell this story. We thought we were done. We sat back, we brought in comfortable chairs. We put it up on the big screen, and we sat back and watched it from beginning to end, thinking, this is our last viewing before we were done, and it ends. And I commented that, I think at the end we should move this here, move that there. What if we did this and did that and did that and deleted that entirely? And it was like, okay, really? But, you just sit down and you rearrange stuff and realize that the story is told in a better way. You end with more emotion, or you, it's sort of a roller coaster ride. If you think about a roller coaster, you go up the lift hill, you go down the first big descent, and then you may have a little bit of sort of flatness, and then you may have some smaller little hills, and it's all about making it sort of a ride, which is kind of what you do in a movie as well. And depending on how you arrange the different parts of the story, the ride some lift hills may be higher than others. And ultimately, that's what we wanted to end with, that satisfactory feeling when you come off that last hill on a roller coaster and coast back into the loading dock.
It's very powerful. It's such a strong Christ-based message, and when you see what the Lord did in Russ and Tori's life, it's pretty amazing. And it's we're not beating around the bush about who we're giving praise and honor to.
Mm-hmm.
We're talk a little bit about that, about making a statement for Christ as we do this as part of the story. That was such a big part of his story, and so many times a lot of filmmakers will kind of water that down. Talk about why we didn't water that down.
Well, I think that Russ, in a way, told that to us, because this movie's told. There's no narration in there. There's nobody. There's no sort of quote unquote voice of God, if is often called, when you hear a narrator speak and you see images on top of that narrator. There is the narration, in a sense, is Russ and Tori telling their story, but they told it to us, and they told us how what they went through, and how the redemption happened in their own life. And it's easy for the writer, the director, the editor to remove bits and pieces and still actually come to the same result in the end. You may not feel quite the same, but we could have taken out some of the discussion of what Christ did for Russ in his soul and his heart, and still kind of had him end up where he ends up currently in the movie. But that's not the true story, in a sense. So I think all we did was just take the real story as he told it to us and put that out there into the world, which is what documentarians are supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it's easy to manipulate, and anything you watch, any show, any documentary, any reality show, there's some manipulation going on. It's the nature of making a story, because you're trying to compact an entire life into 90 minutes here. It's not a simple task.
No, it's not. It was very difficult.
But part of his story was his own his own redemption and his own. I mean, I think Russ was saved long before he became a rock star. But I mean, he's been saved many times. Even though he doesn't say it like that in the movie, I think the way that we tell the movie, you grasp that. Mm-hmm. And there's no question about it.
God's always been there for
yeah.
him. And he sees that hand unfold throughout his life. Even when he was, a line he says from the movie, he went down into the mud to get me.
I thought you were going to, the one line right near the very end, I thought you were going to start to saying that line, which I'm glad you did. But that one that was part about when we rearranged the ending, that there's a line right at the very end of the movie that is his life in sort of in 3 sentences, and that in itself is just really an amazing moment.
Yeah. So talk to me quickly about what you like about editing. What makes editing different from filming or directing?
Well, without the editing, you have no story. You have no program in which you can watch. All the beautiful pictures in the world mean nothing if they're not well edited and well assembled in the post-production. That's what editing is, the post side of production. If they're not assembled well in post-production, it is that editing of all those elements into the story that's what makes it something people want to watch. And I enjoy that. I mean, I think that's part of the fun, is digging in and finding the story. You don't get to go to beautiful locations with fancy cameras on your shoulder very often, rarely ever. But without the editor doing what they do, whoever the editor may be, then all that beautiful footage you assembled, on whatever mountaintop is virtually meaningless.
Well, Scott, you're a great editor, and you've done a great job on the Shonda movie and on this movie, the Russ Taff movie. If someone wants to, talk to you about editing or hire you for services, or how could people get more information about Scott Simmons?
Well, I could just go to my website, scottsimmons.tv. That's 2 T's and 2 M's, scottsimmons.tv, and there's a contact thing, and you can see something. In Nashville, we work on lots and lots of different kinds of stuff. So I've worked on everything under the sun over the years, and I'm self-employed. So
scottsimmons.tv.
That's
it. You can see the movie, Russ Taff, I Still Believe, on October 30th, one night only, in a theater near you. You can go to russtaffmovie.com to get more info. and theater locations.
Yes.
So, Scott, thank you so much for being on the show today. What a pleasure. It was great. Great show. Thanks.
You're welcome. We'll see you on the next one.
If there's a show you've missed, you can go to my website, rickaltizer.com, and catch up. Or you can listen to my podcast in iTunes or wherever you hear your podcasts. Just search for The Rick Altizer Show. Altizer is spelled Altizer. I want to thank you for listening. Hey, would you tell a friend about this show and share the love? Be sure to check us out again next week as we discuss how we communicate the gospel through media to our culture. Let's be clear so the world can hear. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.